37 years old, Curtis earned $51,420 a year as the sanitation lead for the surgical wing at University of Alabama at Birmingham Hospital. It was a job of immense unseen importance, a fortress of sterility he and his team maintained against a constant siege of invisible enemies. He wore his gray uniform with a quiet pride, the same way he wore his $89 Timex watch. On Tuesday, October 12th, at 10:15 a.m., that pride was eclipsed by a wave of clammy, rolling nausea. He was leaning against a stainless steel disposal unit, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway suddenly feeling like a physical weight on his eyelids. One of his team members, a young man named Dion, noticed him steadying himself. "You all right, Curtis? You looking a little pale." Curtis swallowed, the taste metallic and wrong. "Yeah, man, just something ain't sitting right." He thought back to the breakfast he'd made for his wife, Naomi, before he left at 5:30 a.m. 2 perfectly scrambled eggs, a slice of whole wheat toast, and a cup of the cheap Maxwell House coffee he drank, a $7 tub that lasted them 2 weeks. She'd wrinkled her nose at the coffee but eaten the eggs. The memory did nothing to settle the revolt in his stomach. By 10:45 a.m., he was in his supervisor's office, a cramped space that always smelled of bleach and paperwork. His supervisor, a stern but fair woman named Sharon, took one look at his face, luminous, with a sheen of cold sweat against his deep brown skin, and pointed toward the door. "Go home, Curtis, whatever that is. I don't want it making friends with the rest of the crew. Use your sick time." He felt a pang of guilt, but another lurch in his gut made the decision for him. He clocked out at 10:51 a.m., the digital reader beeping his departure. The walk to the employee parking deck felt miles long. He got into his 2012 Toyota Camry, a car with 187,000 miles on it, and a monthly payment of $220 that he'd finally paid off last year. The engine turned over with a familiar, comforting rumble. He pulled out onto the streets of Birmingham, the city a blur of brick and glass outside his window. He just wanted to get to their condo in Mountain Brook, the one Naomi's grandmother had bought for them as a wedding gift, an $850,000 palace of glass and steel that always felt more like her home than theirs. He wanted to lie down in the king-sized bed with the $600 Egyptian cotton sheets and let this sickness pass. He had no idea that the virus in his body was the least of the poisons he would face that day. What he didn't know was that in that moment, his life, the carefully constructed facade of it, was already over. He was just the last person to find out. As he drove the familiar route, he thought about Naomi, picturing her in a lecture hall at the UAB School of Medicine, her elegant silk-pressed hair catching the light, her mind absorbing the complex diagrams of human anatomy. He was so proud of her. The $75,000 a year tuition, paid for entirely by her grandmother, was a ticket to a new life for them both. He worked his steady job, managed their budget, packed her lunches, and made sure the world was quiet and ordered for her so she could focus on her dream. He was the support structure, the invisible scaffolding holding up the beautiful building she was constructing. He believed in that building. He believed in her. The drive took 20 minutes. He pulled into the reserved parking spot next to her car, a gleaming white 2022 BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 graduation gift she'd received 4 years early. He fumbled for his keys, his hand trembling slightly, and let himself into the condo at exactly 11:07 a.m. The silence that greeted him was absolute. But something else was in the air. A smell. It wasn't the faint, clean scent of the lemon verbena cleaner he used on the weekends. It was richer, earthier. It was the smell of expensive coffee. The discovery began not with a sound, but with that smell. It was a specific artisan aroma that Curtis knew well, but only from a distance. It was the smell of Stumptown Holler Mountain Blend, the kind Naomi loved but rarely bought herself because a 12-ounce bag cost $18. She called his Maxwell house brown water, a joke that had long ago lost its humor. On the gleaming white quartz countertop, next to their $350 Breville espresso machine that she used daily, sat a single ceramic mug. It wasn't her usual mug. It was a thick, gray, handcrafted one he'd never seen before. Steam was still gently rising from its surface. He reached out a trembling finger and touched the side. It was warm. Not hot, but recently, intimately warm. A cold dread, far worse than the flu, began to seep into his bones. His eyes scanned the kitchen. Everything was pristine, as always. But then he saw it. In the small carved wooden bowl by the door where they both dropped their keys, sat his familiar ring with the Toyota key and the condo key. Next to it was another set, a single, heavy key fob with a silver Lexus logo on it, attached to a simple silver ring. He had never seen it before in his life. He picked it up. The metal was cool, impersonal. It felt alien in his hand. Who drove a Lexus? None of her friends from medical school that he'd met. Certainly none of his. He put the key down as if it had burned him. His stomach churned. But this time it had nothing to do with the flu. He walked through the open-plan living room, his work boots silent on the expensive hand-scraped hickory floors. The space was a monument to Naomi's taste, curated from the pages of high-end design magazines. A $4,000 white leather sectional sofa, a $1,500 Noguchi-style coffee table. On the wall, a massive abstract painting that had cost her grandmother $12,000. Curtis's only contribution to the room was a small, framed photo on a side table of him and his mother, who had passed away 5 years ago. He looked at it now, her warm, kind face, a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal perfection of the room. He felt a sudden, desperate urge to be back in his childhood home, a small, worn-down house that had always felt more real than this place. He sank onto the edge of the white leather sofa, the expensive material cool against his skin. The warm coffee mug on the counter was a silent accusation. The Lexus key in the bowl was a piece of evidence. He was a man who dealt in facts, in the sterile reality of pathogens and protocols. He needed more than a feeling. He needed proof. And then he remembered. The Ring camera. He had installed it himself 6 months after they moved in, a $199 device that covered the front porch and entryway. He'd done it after a package was stolen from a neighbor. Naomi had called it tacky and paranoid, but eventually agreed. "Fine, Curtis. If it makes you feel useful," she'd said, the words a casual little paper cut. He had set it up with a joint account, but he knew she never looked at it. He, on the other hand, was the one who paid the $10 a month for the cloud storage. He pulled out his phone, a 3-year-old Samsung Galaxy that felt suddenly inadequate in the luxurious room. His hands were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to unlock it with his fingerprint. He opened the Ring app. The live feed showed the empty, sun-drenched porch. He tapped on the history, his heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He didn't have to scroll back far. Before he could dive into the digital abyss of the Ring camera's history, his mind flooded with memories of the life he thought he was building, the stable facade he had so carefully maintained. It was a life of contrasts, a constant, low-grade hum of inadequacy he had learned to ignore. He remembered the housewarming party 2 years ago. The condo was filled with Naomi's family and friends, doctors, lawyers, people who summered in Martha's Vineyard. Her grandmother, Eleanor Vance, a formidable black woman, with luminous, coffee-colored skin and hair styled in an elegant silver crown of twists, held court by the floor-to-ceiling windows. She wore a St. John knit suit, that probably cost more than Curtis's car. He had spent the evening refilling glasses, clearing plates, his $60 dress shirt from Kohl's feeling like a costume. At one point, he overheard one of Naomi's cousins ask her what he did for a living. Naomi had laughed, a light tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Curtis works in environmental services at the hospital. It's very important work," she'd said, her tone making it sound like a charitable project he was involved in. The cousin had nodded with a polite, vacant smile and immediately changed the subject. Curtis had swallowed his pride in a lukewarm glass of champagne. He loved Naomi, and this was her world. He was the guest, the outlier, the man with rough hands and a simple job. He showed his love not with words, which often felt clumsy and insufficient, but with actions. He was the one who got up at 5 a.m. to make sure she had breakfast before her early classes. He was the one who did all the grocery shopping, carefully sticking to the $200 weekly budget they'd agreed upon, even though he knew she regularly spent that much on a single dinner out with her friends. He was the one who meticulously cleaned the $850,000 condo every Saturday, scrubbing the glass shower doors and polishing the stainless steel appliances until they gleamed, because he knew how much she valued appearances. He had once spent 3 hours assembling a complicated $800 IKEA shelving unit for her textbooks, his knuckles raw by the end. She'd come home, glanced at it, and said, "Oh, good, it's done," before turning her attention to her phone. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement of the labor. He was simply the help. He had just never heard her say the words out loud. He remembered their arguments about money, always quiet, tense affairs. "Curtis, we can't keep buying the generic brand of olive oil. It's bad for you." "Naomi, the $25 bottle of organic, first-press olive oil does the exact same thing as the $8 one from Publix." "It's not the same. It's about standards. It's about self-respect." Whose self-respect, he'd always wanted to ask. He made a good, honest living. His $51,420 salary was more than his father had ever made. But in her world, it was a pittance, a rounding error on her grandmother's bank statements. She was a medical student on a path to earning $300,000 a year as a dermatologist. He was supposed to be grateful to be along for the ride. And he was. He truly was. He believed in her future, their future. He endured the subtle condescension, the casual dismissals, because he thought it was a temporary state of affairs. He thought that once she was a doctor, once they were truly partners, he would be seen. He would be valued for the foundation he had laid, for the quiet, steady support that allowed her to soar. He had made a critical mistake. He had confused her ambition with their shared dream. The first video in the ring history was from yesterday, Monday at 11:20 a.m. Curtis's finger, slick with sweat, hovered over the play button. He pressed it. The screen filled with the image of their front porch. A man he had never seen before walked up the steps. He was tall, with light brown skin and a confident, easy swagger. He wore a pair of $300 Allbirds sneakers and a fitted athletic shirt that showed off a gym-sculpted physique. He didn't knock, he used a key. The door swung open, and Naomi was there, a wide, genuine smile on her face. A smile Curtis hadn't seen directed at him in years. She was wearing a silk robe, and she reached out and pulled the man inside. The door clicked shut. The clip was only 22 seconds long. It was long enough. Curtis felt the air leave his lungs. A slow, painful hiss. He was suffocating in his own living room. His hands trembled, but a cold surgical calm was beginning to settle over the nausea and the panic. He was no longer just a sick husband. He was an investigator at a crime scene, and his entire life was the victim. He started scrolling back, his thumb moving with a grim purpose. Tuesday last week, 11 a.m., the same man, this time carrying a brown paper bag from a local bakery. Thursday the week before, 1 p.m. They were leaving together, laughing. Naomi was holding his hand. The casual intimacy of it was like a punch to the gut. Curtis kept scrolling. Days, weeks, months. It was a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. Sometimes on a Monday or a Friday. The man had a key. He came and went from Curtis's home with the ease of someone who belonged there. 14 months. He scrolled all the way back. The first time the man appeared on their porch was August of last year. 14 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays, 14 months of lies, 14 months of him packing her lunch, cleaning their home, believing in her, while she was living a completely separate life, funded by his labor and her grandmother's money. The outrage began to build, a hot, pure flame that burned away the sickness and the sadness. He started watching the clips, not just scrolling past them. He needed to hear it. He needed to see it all. He found a clip from 2 months ago. It was a warm afternoon. Naomi and the man, who he now thought of as Brandon, were sitting on the porch swing he had assembled. They were drinking wine. Brandon gestured back toward the condo. The audio was clear, picked up by the camera's microphone. "Are you sure Curtis won't get off early or something?" Brandon asked, his voice a low murmur. Naomi let out that light, tinkling laugh, the one he'd heard at the housewarming party. It was the cruelest sound he had ever heard. "Please," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "He's just the help, Brandon. He cleans up messes at the hospital. He won't be back until after 7. He's predictable. He's just the help." The words echoed in the silent, expensive room. Curtis closed his eyes, the phrase branding itself onto the inside of his eyelids. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the contempt, the utter, soul-crushing disdain she had for him. He wasn't her partner. He wasn't her husband. He was a piece of furniture. He was a function. He was the janitor of her life, cleaning up the little messes so she could get on with the important business of living. He opened his eyes. The fury was cold now, hard and sharp as a diamond. He continued his work, downloading the videos, saving them to a secure folder on his phone. He found a clip from 6 months ago. Brandon was leaving. He turned back at the door and gave Naomi a long, lingering kiss. Not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss. The kind a man gives a woman he loves. Curtis watched it without flinching, the scene playing out like a movie about someone else's life. He found another clip from a year ago. Brandon arrived holding a small, elegant box. It was from a designer boutique downtown. He handed it to Naomi, and she opened it, pulling out a beautiful, brightly colored silk scarf. A $400 Hermes scarf. Curtis remembered that scarf. She had come home with it that evening, telling him she'd treated herself with some birthday money from her aunt. He had told her it was beautiful on her, that the colors brought out the light in her eyes. He had been complimenting her lover's gift. Each video was a new layer of betrayal, a new shovel of dirt on the grave of their marriage. The sheer volume of it was staggering. Hundreds of clips, hundreds of visits. It wasn't a mistake or a one-time fling. It was a long-term, calculated deception, carried out in his own home, on the sheets he washed, using the electricity he paid for. He felt a strange sense of detachment, the way a surgeon must feel looking down at a diseased organ that needs to be removed. The love he had felt for her was gone, excised by the clean, sharp cuts of the truth. All that was left was a quiet, methodical resolve. She hadn't just cheated on him. She had underestimated him, and that was a mistake she was going to regret. The phone rang at 2:15 p.m., its cheerful, generic ringtone a jarring intrusion into the morgue-like silence of the condo. The screen lit up with her picture. A smiling, happy photo from a vacation they'd taken 2 years ago. The irony was a bitter pill. He let it ring 4 times, composing himself, forcing the cold fury down into a tight, hard knot in his gut. He had to be sick. That was his role now. He answered, pitching his voice to be weak and raspy. "Hey," he croaked. "Hey, babe." Her voice was smooth, concerned. The perfect performance of a loving wife. "I was just checking on you. How are you feeling?" "Not great," he said, and it was the truest thing he'd ever told her. "My stomach is killing me. Just been lying on the couch all day." He was, in fact, lying on the $4,000 leather sectional, his phone in his hand. The evidence of her betrayal saved and backed up to the cloud. "Oh, my poor baby," she cooed. "Did you take anything? There should be some Pepto-Bismol in the medicine cabinet." "Yeah, I took some earlier. Hasn't helped much." He could hear the faint sounds of a coffee shop in the background, the clink of ceramic, the hiss of a milk steamer. She wasn't in the library. She was with him. They were probably dissecting her predictable husband over $6 lattes. Well, just